So this is the VIP section of a Chinese high-speed rail train. It honestly looks exactly the same as the usual first class seats, so I'm not exactly sure what's different other than the fact that it's kind of more private, but you know, it's was only like $3 extra, so well worth it. Afternoon subway in Xi'an, China. This is honestly not a particularly crowded train. My hotel room in the Ramada Bell Tower in Xi'an, China. I'm on the 15th floor. Unfortunately, not much of a view. It kind of looks like this used to be a balcony, but they redid the place so that I'm a little bit lower, which is a little bit disappointing. I would love to be able to get out onto that balcony. So, very nice room though. Very comfortable size. Nice little furnishings. And yeah, that's the room. So after about a 2-hour trip, I am at the Terracotta Warriors Museum area. So I took 2 long subway trips and a bus trip, but it was all really very easy. And I don't know, just much more pleasant than trying to take a taxi or a DD. So here I am inside the Terracotta Warriors Museum Complex. Aha, we've got a big map here. That's where I'm going to start. Another view of one of the major excavation areas in the Terracotta Warriors archaeological site. Some of the excavated warriors on display over here, lined up in ranks. Very, very, very cool. An addendum to the other video, this is all restoration work. All these warriors were put together from broken pieces of pottery. This is pit 3 of the Terracotta Warriors Museum, and this is quite obviously a more active archaeological site where less excavation has been completed. This is interesting. You can see the active excavation going on, including the fact that they've only like half uncovered this horse. It's amazing that some of these figures have obviously been completely buried in dirt and some have remained intact. This displayed figure gives you an opportunity to see how immensely detailed these figures are. And again, this is all clay sculpture from 2,200 years ago. I am in Xi'an City's old district, and this is now the second kind of random street side pet store that I've run across, so that's kind of wild. Cute katoos! Walking down a narrow alley in the Muslim quarter of Xi'an City. And yeah, it's pretty wild because you've got scooters and people all running around on extremely narrow streets, but it's pretty cool. So this is the flowers and birds market. And I think you can see why they've got the birds part in the name. Man, I'd hate to know what the fucking death rate is in birds here. It is May the 30th. This is my last free weekend of the trip. Starting next week, my teaching schedule gets dramatically heavier and I will be working on Fridays, so I won't have any time for trips. So this weekend, the other guys are going out to a city called Guangzhou, which is a big shopping center, and that's what they're doing. They're shopping. They're buying clothes to take back to Africa and other things. I'm not really a shopping guy, so I decided to take a solo trip to Xi'an, which is a very important historical city, most importantly, the seat of the first emperor of China, Qin. And he is the guy who buried the famous terracotta warriors known as the eighth wonder of the world. And so, of course, the biggest reason to come here was to go to the Terracotta Warriors Museum and World Heritage Site. It was an interesting trip to get there. So instead of taking a tour bus or a taxi or what they call DD here, which is Uber, I took the subway. And it took longer, for sure. It was almost 2 full hours each way. But I just read my book, and it was like 18 yuan, which is a little bit over $2 each way. And the tour bus would have been like 120 yuan, which is, I don't know, pushing $70. It would have been a lot more, is the short answer. And honestly, it was great. The subway system in the major cities here is unbelievably good. So, went out to the Terracotta Warriors. It was indeed amazing. I mean, it's hard to express the scale of these excavations, and they are still very much active archaeological sites, excuse me. They are still excavating. Pit 1 is a little more excavated than some of the other ones, especially Pit 3 still has a lot of work to do. And the earthen burials, the wooden beams and ceiling, have collapsed on most of these. So a lot of the figures have had to be reconstructed, and the work they've done to do that is unbelievable. So it was lightly raining all day. I had my kind of hiking hat, which, is pretty good at keeping the water off. I got very damp, but it was just fine. Holy cow. The tour guides were unbelievably pushy. I just could not get them. I got approached by at least 4 different tour guides, one of whom was really pushy. And I just kept saying no, because I wanted to do it myself. I didn't want somebody to be walking around talking to me the whole time. I wanted to experience it myself. Did I miss some things? Did I miss some history? Absolutely. Can I probably get all of that on a YouTube video? Yes. Yes, I can. And I got to experience it through my own eyes, through my own ears, without somebody else filtering some of the experience. The other funny story is I'm a little bit lost trying to find, so you got to take a bus to get to the train station, the subway station, and then the subway is pretty easy. So I got a little lost trying to find where the bus picked up on the way back. And holy cow, this lady with an umbrella would not take no for an answer. I had to basically yell at her. She followed me all over this parking lot. I'm like, I'm fine. I don't need an umbrella, especially not a cheap umbrella that you want 50 yuan for, which is an absolute ripoff. But anyway, so I left early to go to the Terracotta Museum, and so I got back to my hotel pretty early, did some resting. Then about 4, I just decided to walk around. My hotel is right in the old walled city, and so I wanted to walk over to what's called the Muslim Quarter. This town was a very important stop on the Silk Road, and so there was a lot of trade with Muslim nations in parts of Xi'an's history. And so I went to the Muslim quarter and I walked all over the place and eventually had a very tasty dinner. It was raining for a good chunk of the time, but I put a total of like 8.25 miles on today. I am pooped and I am just going to hang out in my hotel room and watch some videos for the rest of the day. But it was a great day. It was really a ton of fun, super interesting. And tomorrow I am going to spend more time exploring the old city. In particular, you can walk along the old city wall. And that's my goal for tomorrow, is to get over to the city wall and walk along the city wall. I don't know if I'm going to put on another full 8 miles again tomorrow, but I'd like to get a pretty good amount of walking in. I am in Xi'an today visiting the Daming Palace Cultural Heritage Site, which was the seat of some of the Chinese imperial dynasties, I think in the 600 AD era. I'm at the site of some absolutely massive public square, and that's the reconstructed like grand hall over there. I am in the Daming Cultural Heritage Site Museum, which tells the history of the construction of Daming Palace, which was the central palace and court for the Tang dynasty for about 270 years. And one of the things that I wanted to share was the extremely detailed diorama / model making that they've done of the ancient buildings. It's very impressive. So this is a massive miniature reconstruction of what the Daming Palace site was like in its prime. Daming Palace was the central imperial complex of the Tang dynasty for about 270 years. So I'm walking by some of the uncovered foundations of one of the great halls of Daming Palace. This was a hall where imperial examinations were performed during the Tang dynasty. Imperial examinations were extremely important. If you came in first place, pretty much no matter how lowly you were before, you were catapulted into prominence. An interesting part of the story of this site, this is an absolutely enormous public park in the middle of Xi'an. And they only discovered that this was the site of Daming Palace in 57. And so they went on a program of displacing 100,000 people and leveling that much residential space and commercial space so that they could preserve this site. Now, the Tang dynasty was the most important of the Chinese dynasties, so it makes sense, but it's still something that I feel like you just literally couldn't do in America. Here's some very cool gate-like structures. I'm not exactly sure what they're about. I am currently in the Drum Tower in Xi'an. Right now we're looking across at the Bell Tower, which I also visited. This is an important cultural and tourist hub in Xi'an, and it's obviously quite a popular site. These two giant drums were used for time telling. These are replicas. The original drums would have been built back in the late 1600s. Well, actually, hold on. The drum tower was built in the late 1400s AD. And so there have probably been multiple generations of that. Unfortunately, we only get to visit the lower floor of the drum tower, but there's clearly a lot of cool stuff going on around here. It's a national holiday weekend in China, so I think there are more tourists than normal. This is some sort of public exhibition hall about the Tang Dynasty, and I must be doing interest for the guy playing the cool drums. So I'm walking along some kind of street market in Xi'an, which is, pleasingly unhinged on this national holiday. It is absolutely hopping and bopping, with a fair number of folks in like fancy dress, and then just regular old tourists. But yeah, wild times. This is the Xi'an city wall, which is one of the best preserved ancient city walls in the world. And theoretically you can get up and walk on top of it, but I think I've maybe come to the wrong gate, and this one is only the one that comes with a fairly expensive tour. Sadly, I don't have time to try to find another gate, and so I'm just gonna have to live with it. I had a really great weekend trip to Xi'an, probably. Um, this weekend was there Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's now Sunday night, and I'm back in Mianyang. Things are about to start to get pretty heavy on the teaching front, so it was really great to have a big weekend adventure on my last really free weekend of this China trip. I went to Xi'an because it's a very important uh, cultural and historical site. It was the seat of the Tang Dynasty for about 270 years. And the first emperor of the Tang Dynasty created an entire army of terracotta warriors and buried them as his army in the afterlife when he died. And so it's known as the eighth wonder of the world, and I got to go see that on Saturday. Um, Public transit in China is absolutely amazing, as I've talked about a few times. And so even though the Terracotta Warriors are a solid 40 kilometers out of the city center, and a lot of people take a taxi, hire a tour bus, something like that, you can get there in the subway. Took 2 lines and an extra bus and almost 2 hours, but I just read my book. And it was cheap and it was great. So then there are a lot of people hire guides because it is a gigantic facility and there's a ton of history. And whoo boy, the ones who were trying to sell me on English speaking guides were very pushy. But I really wanted to experience this for myself. I wanted to take it at my own pace. I wanted to see what I wanted to see and know what I wanted to know. And so I just did it myself, despite how pushy these guides were. And I'm glad I did. I ended up walking a lot all over the place, and it was amazing. The museum was amazing. The excavation sites were amazing. This is still a extremely active archaeological site. There's a ton of stuff that they haven't excavated. They were originally set in basically trenches with wooden and earth coverings, but of course, those collapsed years and years ago because this all happened 2,200 years ago. But still, absolutely amazing stuff, and I enjoyed myself very, very much. Then that afternoon, I just sort of walked around Old Town, grabbed dinner someplace, and went to bed. And the next day, I went out to Daming Palace, which was the main imperial seat of the Tang Dynasty. So the Imperial Mausoleum and the Terracotta Warriors is where the first emperor Qisheng, I think, was buried, but where the Tang Dynasty ran things for about 300 years was out of Daming Palace, which is basically right next to Chang'an, which is the fortified city that's at the center of Xi'an. Anyway, that was also amazing, but much sort of wilder and less touristy, certainly much less popular. gigantic park in the middle of the city. And they only discovered that this was the ancient location of the palace in 1957. And so they just displaced 100,000 people and all of the housing and retail and etc. that went with it, and built a ginormous city park. And it is huge. And it was really fun. I went there quite early on. This would have been Saturday morning. I went to Terracotta Warriors on Friday morning. And there were just all these old folks out exercising and folks walking around. And then there was a really good palace. And again, almost completely deserted this time of day. And yeah, it was great. I enjoyed myself enormously. Um, then that evening, I walked around some more, got myself some dinner. And then it was Sunday morning and I was heading back to Myanmar, and I tried to go over to the city wall, and I read that you're supposed to be able to get on the city wall for 9 yuan, about $1, and walk around. But I think I went to the museum instead, and they wanted more, like $8, and I just didn't have much time, so I didn't do it. So maybe next trip. But yeah, Xi'an was an amazing visit, an amazing city. I rode the subway all over the place. I'm proud of how I've been able to figure out how to do things without really being able to speak Chinese. So I've kind of got all these apps worked out where I can ride hail and I can get a subway card. So I paid for the subway with my phone the whole day, and it was just scan and go, just like the natives. And yeah, it's been really fun figuring out how to navigate the whole system, even as you don't speak that much Chinese.